Now I'm sure some of you have seen this image before, or at least something similar, and it got me thinking, which stand in JoJo's Bizarre Adventure is the most convoluted? And I don't mean which stand is the most confusing or out there, but rather, which stand has the weirdest rules or restrictions to activate the stand, and how practical it really is. So let's go through the stands which I think are the most convoluted, part by part. So starting with part 3, Joseph Joestar's stand Hermit Purple. With the ability to create spirit photography, it doesn't seem too convoluted, unless you ignore the fact that he has to smash a camera to create a photograph. Although later in the story he was shown to use this in much easier ways, like through a TV or from drawing on the ground. Next we have Mariah with Bastet, which has the ability to turn people into magnets, but only if they touch an electric socket. Now I don't need to explain why sticking your fingers in sockets is bad, and why most people simply don't go around touching plug sockets, but to be fair to Joseph and Avdol, it was in the middle of a desert, so I'd probably give it a touch to see if it's real or not too. Carrying on with part 3 is Empress, used by Nina, that has the ability to create a parasite on someone's body if they're touched with her blood. Not too convoluted, but the fact that it has to slowly grow, only for it to produce a fairly weak parasite, seems a bit much for me. And last for the part 3 stands we have Osiris and Atom, used by the Darby brothers. With the ability to steal people's souls, but only through the use of video games and poker, this seems like a very convoluted way to beat your enemies. Moving on to part 4, I want to start with Rohan's stand Heaven's Door. Specifically, before it evolved after his fight with Josuke. Heaven's Door has the ability to turn people into books, allowing Rohan to read memories and write instructions in them. However, in its first appearance against Josuke, it was only able to turn people into books after being shown a copy of Rohan's manuscript. Not really a problem for Rohan, but convoluted nonetheless. After the fight, Rohan's stand evolved to being able to trace his stand to activate the ability. Much easier. Next, for part 4, we have the stand of the part's main villain, Kira, Killer Queen, more specifically, Bites the Dust. Killer Queen's final upgrade, Bites the Dust, has the ability to reset time by 24 hours, but only when Bites the Dust is implanted in someone, in this case Hayato, and then someone inquires about his true identity. Very convoluted, but very suitable for Kira. Now, what I would say is the most convoluted stand in part 4, Teranosuke's Enigma. Enigma has the ability to turn things into paper. The problem arises when trying to turn people into paper. Teranosuke must first learn the so-called tell of someone when they show fear, like biting your lip or closing your eyes. This is already specific in itself, but once he also has to make them perform the action again to trap them in the paper, which is why I say this is the most convoluted stand in part 4. Surprisingly, part 5 didn't have as many convoluted stands as I would have thought. The first stand I could think of was Chocolata's Green Day, a stand that can summon mold on all living organisms in a wide area. Nothing too convoluted until you remember the mold only affects organisms that lower their altitude. There was a reason for this stated in the manga, but yeah, pretty bizarre. Next for part 5 we have Babyface, and honestly this stand confuses me, and is up there for being one of the most convoluted stands in JoJo. The user, Melanie, creates a kind of stand-human hybrid, but first the user has to seemingly find a female host and make her grow the stand by interviewing the woman and asking weird intrusive questions with a computer. It's a pretty weird stand. Next, we have part 6, and I'll start with the stand Survivor. Survivor causes people in a nearby area to suddenly become violent and start fighting. What makes this stand so convoluted is that it works via electric impulses, which can only trigger if the victim is wet. Very convoluted and not very useful at all. Another convoluted stand for part 6 is, of course, Heavy Weather, used by Weather Report. A stand that causes people to hallucinate that they are turning into snails. What makes this stand so convoluted is that it only works if the victim has seen a rainbow produced by heavy weather, or if they're touched by one of the imaginary not real snails. Definitely one of the strangest stands in the series. Now, part 7 has a few convoluted stands, the first being Wired, which allows Pork Pie Kid to generate hooks to capture his foes. However, he can only do this through a pan of water and using objects regarded as bait, like bird feathers, to channel the hooks. Very specific and not very useful. Another maybe not so convoluted stand is Tattoo You, a very simple stand where 11 men can enter each other's bodies through the tattoo on their heads. What made me bring this up is I was wondering if the 11 men had to get the tattoo first at the tattoo parlor, but maybe it just came with a stand. Next, we have part 8, which I would say is the most convoluted stands of all. First, we have California King Bed, used by Daya. It is a very vague ability where it can steal memories from the target, but only if the target fusses over her. This is a very vague condition, which can include worrying about her safety. Very strange, hard to pinpoint. I also want to make a quick mention to Keijo's Born This Way, a stand which summons chilling winds and a bike riding stand. What makes this odd is that in order for it to activate, the target must open something, be it a book, a door, or even a pen lid. Very niche. Another stand I wanted to mention is Ozone Baby, a stand that causes intense air pressure in a room. What makes this so convoluted is that the user, poor Tom, has to bury a Lego figure of the White House, for some reason, in the ground for it to work. Definitely one of the most hyper-specific stand conditions in the series. And last of all, we have Fun, Fun, Fun. Probably the most convoluted stand in the series, Fun, 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 used by Ojiro, has the ability to control people's limbs, but only if he is standing directly above them, and if they cut their limbs on a sharp object. This stand seems completely useless outside of the story and almost impossible to actually utilize. Now, Part 9 is still in its early days, so I can't really name any convoluted stands. The closest would be the Matakudasai used by Usagi, which can transform into any object that is requested by anyone but the user, but I'm sure there'll be more weird and wonderful stands in the future. So those are my picks. Let me know what I left out, and thank you so much for watching.